Hello everybody, it's me again, Rich Andre. And for today's video, we're going to be talking about the philosophical razors, okay? You probably are aware of this, okay? So a philosophical razor is basically just these beliefs, okay? Or just these sort of philosophical guidelines that help us in order to sort of navigate the world. And all of these razors, okay, all of these philosophical razors I found on Wikipedia, okay? So all of it is credited to Wikipedia. Okay? So let's start on with the first philosophical razor, which is Alder's razor, or the better name, in my opinion, is Newton's flaming laser sword. Okay? So Newton's flaming laser sword, it basically just says that which cannot be settled by experiment is not worth debating. Okay? So he basically this razor basically just says that if you can't experiment on something, okay? If you cannot empirically observe a thing and make experiments out of it, whether it be like sort of a thought experiment, for example, okay? A thought experiment, provided that that thought experiment is based upon objective reality, okay? So Alder's razor basically just says that if you cannot make an experiment out of something, can make a hypothesis out of something that can be proved, it's not even worth thinking about, okay? So the next is Grice's razor, okay, aka Guillaume's razor. I'm not sure if I pronounced that right, okay? So Grice's razor basically just tells us to look at sort of like the implications in everyday conversations, okay? So what it basically just entails is that we shouldn't be focusing more on what is said, on what is semantically mentioned, over what is the meaning that is trying to be conveyed by the speaker, okay? So what this basically just says that you should focus on, or focus more on, what is the speaker trying to convey, rather than hyper focusing on what is being said, okay? On what words are being said, because language, okay, is different for others. Even though you speak the same language, the words that you use can be used differently by them, okay? So to prevent any miscommunication, a good solution to that would be Grice's razor, which is basically just thinking about what a person is implying from the words, okay? So the next would be Hanlon's razor. And in my personal opinion, this helps me a lot, This helps me a lot to navigate, just everyday life, Hanlon's razor basically just says that do not attribute to malice that which can easily be attributed to stupidity. Which basically just means that you shouldn't think that someone has bad intentions over you over a mistake that they probably aren't aware of. Okay? And what I mean by that is some people, okay, they don't interpret the world the same as you. And that sort of has an effect. Okay? That sort of has an effect on certain things or certain behaviors that they do that could be right or wrong, but they probably aren't aware that they're right or wrong. So you shouldn't assume that the reason why they did something, okay, presumably wrong to you, okay, you shouldn't assume that that was a result of malicious intent or some kind of evil plot, okay, when they're probably just aren't aware of it. Or in other words, they're kind of stupid to the situation. Okay? So the next razor is Hitchens razor. Okay, so this is named upon the famous debater Christopher Hitchens. Okay, so this razor, okay, Hitchens razor basically just entails that something, okay, if you claim something without evidence, okay, you can just see in this illustration here, right here, what can be asserted without evidence can be dismissed without evidence. So it basically just shuts down whatever claim that you may have that it doesn't provide any singular evidence. Okay, and that's basically the essence of Hitchens' razor. Okay, whatever thing, okay, whatever claim that you have, whatever opinion that you have that you don't have evidence for, you probably can just dismiss it as well without evidence. That's basically the essence of Hitchens' razor. Okay. Now we can just move on to the next razor, which is called Hume's guillotine. Okay, so the way that I understand Hume's guillotine is basically just the premise of Hume's guillotine is that whenever you make a statement, okay, whenever you make an argument, if that argument is backed by facts, it's backed by sort of objective reality, okay, that everybody could agree on, okay, that are grounded on fundamental truths about anything, about any certain topic or about any certain statement that you have that is grounded on actual facts, okay, that statement should be only about those facts. Okay? So your statement is grounded by facts, therefore the statement should be factual. Hume's guillotine basically just says that if your premise, if your statement is grounded by facts, you can't make moral judgments with that statement. What do I mean by that? Okay? Because a moral statement, a moral claim, or any ethical claim, okay, should be grounded in morals as well. They cannot intersect. Those two cannot intersect, facts and morals. Okay? There is a clear distinction between the two, and that's basically the premise of Hume's guillotine. You cannot make a statement that is both factual and moral, because there is a certain sort of inherent subjectivity to morals in general. So I think that's how I interpret the Hume's guillotine. So let's go to the next razor, which is probably the most famous razor, which is Occam's razor. Occam's razor. Okay? So what Occam's razor basically just says, okay? Let's say you're telling me that, okay, the FBI is plotting some kind of brainwashing ulterior motive. Okay? Now you're going to have to prove me that the FBI is planning an ulterior motive. Okay? Now how do you prove that to me? Of course, you have to get a lot of evidence. Okay? And when you gathered all of the evidence, you have to make sure that those evidence comply with each other. They have to agree with each other in order for you to back that statement that you have of the FBI plotting an evil ulterior motive. And how many linear sort of explanations you have to make for that to be true, for that to be sufficiently, for you to say that that claim is sufficiently evidence-backed. There are a lot of explanations that you have to make. Therefore, if you kind of make a mind map on how you come to that conclusion, it's going to be very, very messy. Okay? It's going to be very, very messy, considering that you have to consider, okay, that you have to sort of juggle a lot of variables that are related to the conclusion that you are trying to reach. Okay? So Occam's razor basically just argues that the simplest explanation for anything could be correct. okay, could be the actual explanation. The simplest explanation is the correct explanation. Okay? Or more, okay, so let me just word that differently. Okay? Prefer the simpler explanation. Because if you have a simpler explanation, like for example, okay, I went to the bathroom because I had to pee. Now, how do you make sense of that statement? Okay? Why did you, if you ask someone, why did you went to the bathroom? Okay? The only explanation that you have is they went to pee or they went to take a bowel movement. You wouldn't think that the person that is in the bathroom is trying to cook some rice or do something else, you know, like for example, like building a nuclear device. You wouldn't think that, and that's basically the Occam's razor. Prefer the simpler explanation over, you know, more complex explanations. But that's not to say that you shouldn't consider the complex explanations. Okay, you should still consider that. Okay. But Occam's razor basically just argues that the simpler explanation is more likely, is more probable to be correct. Okay? So the next razor that we have is Popper's falsification criterion of demarcation. So this is a really long name, you know? This is a really long name. So we can just read this quote from the person who basically conceptualized this razor. We can just read the quote that we have here. Insofar as a scientific statement speaks about reality, it must be falsifiable. And insofar as it is not falsifiable, it does not speak about reality. So if you are saying something, if you are arguing about something, your argument should be proven false before it can be proven true. And what do I mean by that? If something, okay, if your argument cannot be said, it cannot be inversed, okay? So you're assuming that your argument is correct, right? Let's say you're assuming that your argument is correct. If I cannot prove your argument wrong in any singular way possible, then that argument of yours is probably not grounded in reality. So there has to be some level of a way that I can challenge your argument and sort of make it false, okay? Make it so that the argument is false. If it cannot be falsified, as it says here, it's not grounded in reality. You're not speaking about reality. Your argument is not backed by reality. So if I cannot falsify or inverse, okay, make an inverse version of your argument. Like for example, okay, let's say I claim that I'm 6 feet tall, but in actuality, I'm like 5 foot. Okay. So the inversion of me being tall is me being short. And if I can't prove that that you're short, if I can prove the opposite of that, it's probably not grounded in reality. See? But that's sort of an oversimplification of it, you know? So that explanation is short. That example in particular is probably an oversimplification of it because we both know that you're either tall or short, you know? So that's basically it. So let's go to the next razor. It's called Sagan standard, the Sagan standard. So the Sagan standard is basically just very simple. It just says that, okay, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. Okay, so let me just claim that Area 51 has aliens. Now, what's my proof? I can't just say that, oh, social media says that Area 51 is full of SCP aliens. Okay? So that's not proof enough. That is proof, but that's not proof enough. You have to have sort of a primary source, sort of primary proof for that claim of yours, considering that it's very extraordinary. Okay? Considering that it is extraordinary, it's out of the normal. So you have to have the same proportional out of the normal evidence to back your claim. That's basically just the same standard. Okay? So my interpretations of these, okay, my interpretations of these razors, the following razors that I explained, I think to some degree they help you to navigate life, you know, to help you sort of make decisions that could potentially benefit you, you know. So I don't think that you should abide by this religiously, but I think they're good tools, you know. They're somewhat useful tools provided that you utilize them correctly and properly. Okay? Of course, you have to consider the context of any single situation that you're experiencing, but I think that these are still, you know, good sort of guidelines that you can use when it comes to, for example, debates. And that's basically it for my interpretation. You know? So, thank you guys for watching. If you learned anything, please like my video. And if you can, subscribe. If you didn't like the video, okay, you can just give me your feedback in the comment section. That's basically it. Thank you guys for watching.